Robert Grasmere brings us Art of Eight Limbs, and this is a martial arts action movie with a hint of James Bond. It stars Ludi Lin and Nicholas Hammond, and Hammond is the reason why I actually checked this out. If you are unaware, Nicholas Hammond was the original live-action Spider-Man in that kind of short-lived TV series, I believe in the late 70s or possibly early 80s. So yeah, I haven't seen much of him since then, so I was very kind of interested in obviously seeing Hammond in this particular kind of role. So what is the story? Well, it focuses on Ludi Lin's character, who is a lower level CIA operative. He's actually like a data analyst, but in his spare time he likes to do kickboxing, and he's kind of ranked relatively high in this kind of national league. Anyway, and there happens to be this kind of nerve agent gas which is being sold on the black market, and it's in the guy who has possession of it is this kind of dictator on Myanmar, and this guy happens to be like a big martial arts fan, so he is organising this kind of tournament and at the same time using the kind of the cover and all the hustle and bustle to auction off these nerve gas missiles. So because the character that Ludi Lin plays is a legit martial artist, the CIA effectively get him to infiltrate this kind of tournament with Nicholas Hammond's character as his kind of handler, and try and confirm if this nerve agent is actually on scene, in which case they will send in the Navy SEALs. Now what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So this is a title that is actually the name of a book as well, and I thought initially the movie may have been an adaptation of this book, but I don't think it is. I think it's anything to do with it. It just happens to have the same title and be a very similar subject matter, but there you go. What do I like about this movie? So it's very much a kind of Street Fighter-esque Mortal Kombat style tournament movie, I guess originating with movies like Enter the Dragon, I suppose. So if you like various combatants fighting for their very lives, then you may want to check this movie out. And obviously you have the extra element here. These are CIA operatives, you know, working to try and figure out what's going on with this kind of bad guy and his henchman who has this kind of lair and stuff. We even get a kind of a scene where, you know, our protagonists are left to die, and the bad guy kind of walks out the room and leaves them to die. So it has this kind of old school James Bond vibe to it as well. So if you like it kind of like, you know, I guess you would have said the older sort of James Bond style movies, then, you know, there's maybe stuff to enjoy here, especially if you're a fan of the martial arts. Let's talk about the martial arts. Now, I didn't think they were spectacular, but they were solid. There's kind of like 5 or 6 fight scenes in the movie, and they were pretty good. I don't think it was anything kind of spectacular that you haven't seen before, but they were, as I say, solidly kind of choreographed and filmed. But because they were maybe somewhat more grounded, I suppose you could argue that maybe these fight scenes, because they weren't quite as over the top that with some scenes you kind of may have seen in modern movies, it does give them a little bit more of a realistic angle to a certain degree. They do seem more like genuine kind of tournament fights, if that makes sense, without the kind of the pomp and circumstance that you may have seen in more elaborate combat movies and things like that. So it does, I suppose, give it that that reality to a certain degree at least. I think one of the aspects I like, without going into too much detail here to avoid spoilers, Ludi Lin's character is a relatively junior CIA operative, and he isn't great at his job. Like, he makes some mistakes while he is on location, on this kind of like, within this kind of bad guy layer. So the operation doesn't go really according to plan because the character messes it up slightly. And I thought that was good. It kind of makes this character seem fallible, and you know, he's not the expert kind of agent and and things like that. So I thought that was a good touch to the movie. Even his martial arts skills. There's a scene, for example, where he fights like the kind of the champion, and it's kind of debatable who won. So again, I like the fact that they didn't kind of overdo some of the kind of the aspects here to make him seem like super agent or super fighter. I have to say, I really quite enjoyed Nicholas Hammond's character here. He kind of reminds me a little bit of like a Pierce Brosnan sort of style character. Now, I will admit his character doesn't have a lot to do in the film. He is more of a supporting role, to be sure, here. But I liked his kind of older, more mentor-like agent who is obviously not fighting, because Nicholas Hammond's quite old at this point. But I thought his performance was very sort of grounded, very kind of just matter of fact, which I kind of quite appreciated here. And you know, obviously the location shooting here with all the kind of the ornate statues and this on-location shooting makes it, you know, feel kind of very elaborate and tropical and kind of, you know, and very kind of like just fits the kind of the idea here that this kind of tournament is taking place in kind of Myanmar. So it has that kind of flavour to it, if that makes sense, the on-location flavour. So, you know, and it's a kind of a fun, it is a somewhat of a turn your brain off to a certain degree movie, but there's a certain amount of fun to be had here with the kind of the shenanigans. Let's talk about what doesn't work, and let me just touch on something that I've already mentioned here. The fight scenes, as I say, they're serviceable, they're okay, they're solid, but there's nothing really, I think, that's going to go wow and blow your socks off into that was some incredible stunt work or choreography or martial art prowess. It's really very much business as usual for a relatively kind of low budget martial arts film. So certainly not a bad fight scenes, but like I said, I don't think anyone's going to be going, oh wow, this is the new Raid or anything kind of like that. Maybe one thing I think people may say about this movie is the acting overall from some of the cast is not particularly solid. Yeah, some of the kind of the line delivery here feels kind of stilted and somewhat jarring at times. The performances, with the exception of a couple of people, I think are erring on the side of below average, shall we say. I think the whole tournament seems a little bit smaller scale. Like we have it's meant to be this worldwide tournament, but we only ever see fighters from 4 countries. You know, so it feels like it's suffering under the weight of the relatively kind of small budget. Yes, it's this international tournament, but we have an American fighter, we have a Myanmar fighter, a French guy, and a Chinese guy, and that's a tournament basically. So you know, it's a pretty short-lived tournament. Let's just kind of be honest here. So yeah, the kind of budgetary restraints here feel a little bit constrained. As I've mentioned, I do think Nicholas Hammond's character is good in the role, but to be honest with you, if you took his character out of the movie, it wouldn't make a lot of difference, to be honest. His role just seems like we have Nicholas Hammond, let's find something for him to kind of do. Really, he's pretty a pointless character, if we're being honest. And as I've mentioned, this has this kind of old-fashioned James Bond feel to it, but in 2024, I feel probably most viewers are looking for a little more sophistication in the storytelling, because it does feel very kind of old-fashioned in its approach to a kind of espionage spy thriller with added kind of martial arts things. It does feel a little bit, you know, silly at times, to be honest with you, and the whole concept of this tournament, just because this dictator is a fan of martial arts, and you know he's got these weapons smugglers or buyers and stuff. It seems like unnecessary risks for a professional criminal and things like that. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit sort of silly, and it just has a cheap feel to it. I've mentioned some of the elements here, but overall it kind of feels a little bit on the sort of lower production side in some aspects, at least. I think the fact that it's shot on location a lot of the time in this kind of with all this kind of ornate architecture does help, but it still does feel a little bit on the cheaper side overall. So how does it break down in conclusion? I would say it's a watchable film if you're a fan of kind of lower budget action films, martial art films, but it isn't going to kind of be anyone's top 10 list, I would imagine. So it's somewhat of an average movie, ultimately. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do let me know what your thoughts are, and I shall look forward to seeing you next time.